Hi, everybody. I'm Leanne Shinton, pet biz experts, but we are going through a name change to Automation Dogs. And I'm so excited to have Jeris Pugh visiting us today. And he's from New York and he has an amazing company called Martial ARFS. And I met him through Bobby Lyons. Welcome, Jeris.
Thank you for having me.
So, Bobby was telling me, because we were talking about canine fitness and
hmm
how you have the dogs coming in, the people coming in, and you're using fitness um, as part of the obedience, just, maybe making it fun. Maybe you could share a little bit about that and martial arts and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah. So the idea was so I used to teach martial arts. And so my example was always we would get a lot of children who were hyperactive, ADHD, ADD, and all that kind of thing. And you didn't send them to behavior school, right? You got them involved in an activity to get that energy out. And at the same time, they would learn um, behavior, if you will. So it was karate. So we would teach them discipline and stuff like that, but it was in a fun, engaging environment that also let them get that energy out. And so whether it's karate or any sort of sport where there's a structure, the idea is through the structure that you're able to improve a child's behavior because there's not, they're not bad kids, right? They just have this level of
Right.
energy that it's hard for them to control. And the other option, right? So, you don't just let them run around and burn it off, right? Go out in the backyard and just run around in circles. Um, it's the structure that really makes a difference because we all say, right, a tired dog is a good dog. Um, but when that dog isn't tired anymore, what do we have? So we kind of get into this cycle of burning this energy off through whatever means, dog park, daycare, backyard. And then we have this cycle of the same problem over and over again. We're not addressing the behavior aspect of it in terms of how the energy is driving the behavior. So I thought it would be great to kind of combine the physical activities, whether it's agility or whether it's conditioning exercises or anything. So we do lure, like we do all dog sports, we do all these things, but it's tied to improving the dog's behavior. And you get a lot of people, so they come in, they say, "Oh, I want to do agility," and because the dog has energy and it's really agile and all these things, but it doesn't have the behavior. So we'll explain even agility. We say it's obedience on the move. Like we try to create an idea that we're not just running a dog, so
Hmm.
we have lure. And so we have a lot of people, their dogs chase rabbits and things like that. So, okay, we're going to work on lure, but we're going to work it from a behavior aspect. Your dog sits, good. It gets the chase. It drops, good, sit, chase. It recalls, chase. So we're trying to help them deal with the problems that they have, a dog that might have high prey drive, but also get the energy out at the same time instead of simply focusing on how do I get this dog that's has this drive to just not do it, right? That's the hard part. And that's where
Mm.
sometimes people end up using different types of training that may be more intense that a particular dog may be able to handle, but it stops the unwanted behavior. And so that's what we don't want. I have border collies. I had a border collie. Her name was Ripley. It was actually my wife's dog. And Ripley was a very, very soft dog. But if there was a soccer ball to chase, she turned into a completely different dog. And so we get that sometimes with dogs with different prey drives and stuff. And the energy is so high. And so people often try to control their dog in the worst scenario that the dog behaves. And that's when they sometimes are too intense. So we want to get that energy out in a constructive manner. Okay, Ripley, here's the soccer ball. I'm going to kick it. You got to sit first. Good. You sit, kick, come back. And so we build a structure around it so the dog gets to release the energy, chase the soccer ball. But I get the dog also to listen to the obedience because I just don't want to randomly chasing balls. We have soccer fields and just she might
Hmm.
go running. And it also prevents me from being too hard on her when she might have this desire to chase a soccer ball and I don't want her to. So if I build the obedience into it while giving them the outlet, it just enabled us to help people understand their dogs better, improve their behavior, and at the same time give them the energy expenditure that the dog needs.
I think
So that was
too.
kind of the original idea of that. Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. That was
Oh
the kind of
no.
original idea. And then we got into doing, like I said, conditioning exercises and all these kind of other things. And it was about the platform. So there's different platforms. Some people might use a climb and or something to practice sit and stay and all that. And so my idea was we could do the same behaviors on an unstable surface. And while we're on that unstable surface,
Mm,
the dog is then physically challenged while they're doing their sit stay, right? And their body's swaying because the disc is unstable. And so they have to stay physically aware. Energy expenditure, again, always how can we get the energy out of this dog while we're teaching it the behavior that we want it to learn. And it's just people have been really receptive to it, far more receptive actually than I thought they would be. Um, Seemingly because just you know there's just more and more high energy dogs out there that there was times at least where we were before we opened because there wasn't like this something like this for people. um you know my question always, what did you do till this point? And most of the time it's the dog park, or it's just fighting with
oh
the
yeah.
dog. And life was, if you couldn't go to the dog park and just burn it off, then, you're in this kind of back and forth. Some people just shut the dog down and they just like, I can't handle walking this dog. So it's just in the backyard, and then when you mix in reactivity and all these other things into it, we got a high energy dog that is now reactive, and now we can't walk it. So we're not walking it. So the reactivity isn't getting any better. The energy expenditure isn't happening. And so there's all these negative aspects of what's going on because the dog has the energy. For whatever reason, it's reactive. And again, that adds to this um, difficulty where people might be too hard on their dog because they're just trying to stop this behavior and it's overwhelming them. And I talk about that a lot to clients, that at the end of the day, they're just overwhelmed. They can be, it's very emotional. You love your dog, you want to enjoy the time that you have with your dog, but you're struggling. And it's really nobody's fault. And it's just, how do we create a scenario where we can tackle a lot of things at the same time that's fun and enjoyable for people?
Yeah, I think when you're speaking too about your background being, is it MMA, like martial arts?
So I used to train in a traditional martial arts. So I did do some MMA and stuff, but it wasn't as long ago as I started. MMA wasn't really popular at the time, so everything was more of a traditional. So it was a lot more focused actually on the discipline of the arts during that period of time. Standing at attention and bowing and all that kind of stuff. That was a major aspect of what we did. And you just have kids who just couldn't stand still, and Timmy stands
Yeah.
still and he can't. So we're going to play, we would play games. We're going to play the attention stance game. All right, right. We stand, nobody move, nobody move. Oh, Timmy, don't move. Timmy, don't move. Okay. Timmy's a winner. And then we would go into a fighting stance and then let that energy out. Okay. Back to attention kind of thing. So, we do it with the dogs. Same thing. We're going to go over two jumps, jump, 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 come sit, or we have a tug toy. Get it, get it, get it, get it, get it, sit. Teaching the owners that it doesn't, when they're using treats and you have these food motivated dogs and it's great, but it's still not getting the energy out. So the dog will sit and it's sitting there, you see it exploding, and at some point, they're not able to work in a manner in which the dog is trying its best to focus and follow along with positive reinforcement. They're doing the treats and they're comfortable doing it that way, but this still has this energy. And so we'll say, okay, right now, put the treats away. Let's get out a toy. We're going to do the exact same kind of behavior. The reward is just going to be the toy instead of the treat. And now your dog is panting and it's laying down. And this is the dog that you really wanted, you know, um, at the end of the day, because it's more calm.
Yeah, thinking of like you going from the human element of martial arts and then blending it with dogs, it made me think like my mom is a retired teacher and, she would deal with some difficult kids, abused kids, things like that. And her recommendation for kids that were underconfident, being bullied maybe, was to get them into like a karate or a martial art. So I'm thinking, hey, for dogs, do some agility. This sounds like it's also going to be a confidence booster for them.
And it has been, interestingly enough. It was another thing that we didn't necessarily anticipate. But just overcoming these challenges, physical challenges, even if it's just, getting a dog over an A-frame, they step on it and it creaks and they're like, oh my God.
Mm.
We just keep a positive reward, get the owner involved. Yay, yay, yay. Get them up. Maybe they go up just a little bit, a quarter of the way up. Then we bring them down. Yay, have a big party. And then we try it again. Um, we've had dogs, everybody, I'm sure a lot of trainers out there have worked with some anxious dogs. And if you haven't, you will. There's a lot out there. And so going at their pace, keeping it positive, and helping them overcome, these physical challenges we'll do it even if it's separation anxiety. Um, we'll put a jump, between the owner and the dog. Now it's got to do a jump to get back to the owner. So there's just so many different ways that you can help keep the dog active, build its confidence, and
Mhm.
get it moving. Dogs need to be moving, even the scared ones. And so we just find ways in order to do that, to build the confidence through these activities and, just keeping it positive so they feel good about what they're doing.
Now, your vision and creativity and business mind is something we wanted to tap into today. You have a book, you have a podcast, and
Yeah.
you've created a business that is very unique and super cool and fun. And you have a lot of trainers on staff, you have new trainers coming in. And I think I saw something about a franchise opportunity on your website
Yeah.
too.
Yeah.
So, I listen to your podcasts and, there's so much value there that would help other dog trainers. And my podcast, I try to help dog trainers on a business side. So I think having like two podcasts with you, just talking about some of the fun stuff they can add to their training. But today I'd love to tap into, the business side of things. I have some stats here that I just kind of wanted to read. I didn't make this up. This is actually from the US Bureau of Labor Statistics. Um, General small business failure rate. 20% fail within the first year, 50% fail within 5 years, 65% fail within 10 years. Dog training businesses likely follow similar trends, but may even face higher risks due to common industry specific challenges. So things like burnout, um, not working your leads, relying on referrals, and maybe not running ads, like things that are causing some of these dog trainers to fail. I think a big one that you and I were kind of talking about earlier is like show up. Show up. It takes grit to run a business. Um, Following up with your leads. It's being an entrepreneur takes grit, and sometimes, and this might be something you could speak on first. Is these one person operations where they don't have time to scale, they don't know how to hire right, and they're scared to hire somebody. So, growth. I mean, you've created a wonderful business. How did you go from, I'm assuming, a one person operation?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's a really good question. And so we've been open 13 years now. We're completing our 12th year. Um, and so I hear those statistics. I'm like, okay, we're on year 12, so we're doing okay.
Yeah, you made it.
But you do have those conversations, and I would have those conversations with just people in general, and they would be like, "How's business?" I said, "Well, we're still here." And so
Mm,
that was a big deal. Year after year, we're still here. We're still here. We're still here. Um, and so here's one of my mentality, especially very early on, um, was that we can't fail. So that was my mentality. The martial arts cannot fail. So whatever that mean I had to do is what I was
mhm.
going to do. I mean, short of like, criminal activity and stuff, um, but that requires a lot of sacrifices. There are times where you can make the choice and everybody will understand, right? So I can tell you this was 2016. It was June of 2016. It was 2 weeks after Father's Day. So the week of Father's Day, my second daughter was born. 2 weeks after Father's Day, my dad died.
Mm,
And the following week, essentially my best trainer, we had a parting of the ways. So I was down not just the trainer, but my best trainer. I had a new baby, and my dad just died. And I remember the whole week where they're planning the service, I couldn't be down there with my family. Like I just could not be in
Ugh,
two places at one time. And so I always explain to people in that moment, if we failed, everybody would have understood. I mean, your dad died and you had a baby and your trainer left. Like, it's just like, I get it. We're sorry kind of thing. Everybody would have felt for me. Everyone would have said, okay. And so there's moments like that that you have to kind of, you know, be wary of where you can throw in the towel and what choice you make. Everybody, every business owner, I mean, every person, but certainly every business owner is going to face these adversities. And there might be some people who be like, you're crazy. Your dad died and you didn't go. I eventually went down to the service, but while they were planning the service, you didn't go down there, or you had a baby and all this stuff. That was the choice that I made. That was the sacrifice that I made for my business to succeed. Again, that was 2016. So here we are 9 years later. My daughter's great. My family, we get together for my dad on his birthday. Like, life has moved on and everybody is okay. And my business is thriving. I could have made the choice to not do that, to just
mhm.
say, I can't do this anymore. Um, and so it's hard, like you said, in terms of showing up, it's hard. And there are opportunities for you to say, I don't want to do this anymore. And nobody would blame you. But there are reasons that you don't realize as to why some businesses succeed and some businesses don't. And probably any business owner will be able to tell you about a time where they could have quit, or a time that it was too hard, a time or times where they were like, I can't do this anymore, and they just get up and they do it again. And that is how you will succeed. um should it be that way? No. But there's other
Yeah.
opportunities if those are the choices and things that you don't want to make. And that's something, when you decide, you say, I want to be a dog trainer for a living, what does that mean to you? And there's so many things that you say, well, I'm willing to put into work and I want to do this. But that is something different for everyone. And you will hit a wall, and it depends on what you do in that wall. Are you going to stop? Are you going to keep going? And maybe you stop for a little while and then you regroup, right? But that's, we look at adversity and habits and stuff. If it gets hard and every time you stop, you know, do you regroup? Is it something you're going to get back to? I'm going to get back to that. I'm going to get back to that. I'm going to get back to that. And then five,
Mm,
10, however many years, now you're older, you're more tired, there's all these things. And it's not easy, but I will say the one thing, because you asked me about, staff and growing, and the one thing um, that I did before I opened was to make sure I had a business model that could survive.
mhm.
So I didn't say, I want to be a dog trainer. I got some clients. Some of those clients told some other people about me. I drum up business here and there. And I say that word a lot. Like, I'm going to just drum up some business. Like,
Mm,
that's not a business. That is, a side hustle, right? So I went in and I said, okay, right, we have this idea of obedience and exercise is a lot of what we say. Um, Obedience and exercise. So how do I create a business model before I'm even going to do it? Before I'm going to start saying, "Yay, I'm going to get some clients." I'm not even trying to get clients right now. How do I make this profitable? What structure do I need to put in place with this concept so it can survive in easy situations, let alone hard situations, because there are things that I don't even know are going to happen, like my father passing away. So if it's not surviving when it's easy, it's certainly not surviving when it gets hard. And I spent a significant amount of time on the business aspect of it before I did it. And part of that was, for me, everybody's path and everyone's journey is going to be different. So it's okay. I have a facility, right? But it's okay if you're going door to door or whatever. You're training people in the park. These
right.
things are all fine. But for me, I said I want to open a facility. What is that going to take? What are my expenses going to be? Like, how do I do this? How do I have enough money? And then what if I'm not making the money that I need to make? Like, how am I going to do this? And you just keep going, and you have to shop it with people who are going to say, what about this? And sometimes it gets annoying because everybody can find a problem with everything. But there are going to be some things that you didn't think of. Oh my God, I didn't think of that. Oh my God, I didn't think of that. Because I can tell you everything I went through, exactly how I went through it. And I can pretty much guarantee something different's going to happen with yours that I was like, oh my God, that didn't happen to me, you know?
Right.
And there's, so it's really that kind of, do I need people? And if I need people, when am I going to bring them in? What kind of people do I want? And I talk about it in my book. Um, um, and for me, I needed someone reliable and someone who could follow instruction. Like, that's what I needed. Those are really hard to find. Reliability is one thing, and then following instruction. Now, here's my point. When I always say that to people is I did not need someone who knew how to train dogs. And so that's important when you're looking at people. Because some people are like, oh, I need this. I need a reliable and someone who follows instructions. If they show up every day and they listen to what I tell them to do, they're going to learn how to train dogs. They're going to learn how to do everything that I need them to do. To the point where sometimes I prefer people who have no dog training experience, or
Right.
because you have so many habits of all these different things. I've had people come in, no dog training experience, become the most wonderful dog trainers. And here's the truth of it, right? We all start with no dog training experience.
Yep.
That's where we all start. We learn however we learn, be it a program or be it on shadowing and internships and stuff like that. I'm a huge believer in that. Again, to answer your question about growing and staff and stuff, I'm a huge believer of somebody coming in, internships, somebody coming in, whatever their background, if they're willing to come in, they're going to show up every day. And we were talking about, you're going to show up, you're going to put in the work, and you're going to follow instruction. Then you can learn how to do this and you can be very successful. So when you're looking to build your business and you're looking to build people, I always look for the right person. So one of my trainers now, she was actually a teacher's assistant in college. And so I knew she was good with people. So the next part is, well, can she train a dog? No, she can't train a dog because she's never had, but we have all been at that point. So is this somebody that I can bring in who's going to be reliable, right? Who's going to follow instruction and has personality that people can relate to. And so when you can relate to somebody, then they're going to be receptive to the things that you say. And so there's been times I've had the most fantastic dog trainers that just people don't want to listen to because they're
Right.
unrelatable. Whether it's judgment or whether it's a lack of understanding, we can, as dog trainers, get our dogs to do anything. It's what we do. So I always say, well, this person is, they're a dentist. What do they know about dogs? And so we have to teach them that way. And if we can't relate because we're either that good at dog training or our dogs are that good, or we're just, you know, the reality is not people person because we're dog people, then that's a huge impediment to succeeding with your business because it's a people business.
Yes.
There's realities, right? If you have drop off, board and train, stuff like that, then okay, you're not necessarily front facing people all the time. And so there's a lot of different business models out there. And so that was kind of my point earlier. What you have to decide what type of business that you want
Hmm.
to have and grow and go from that point. And it's not necessarily something that you can't kind of learn as you go, but you are setting yourself up more likely for failure if you don't have a solid business concept at the very least first.
So much to unpack here. There's one thing I wanted to
I'm
go back
sorry.
to. But
You
you've
can cut me off at any point and then just ask a question right then and there, and then I'll answer the question and I'll just keep right on going. So you got to stop me if you need to.
well, there's back to the beginning. You spoke about, yeah, a really hard time in your life, and I'm so
Yeah.
sorry for you, but I'm so proud that you did that. You have an entrepreneurial spirit and you have grit. But I think one thing that everybody needs to think about is when you get into that really tough time, what's your why? Like, I know for me, one of my whys is I want to be able to give my mom some money so she can go on her trips. She's a solo woman traveler and she's like riding camels out in, you know, somewhere and hot air balloons and swimming with sharks. And I'm like, Mom, please stop. But she wants to do all these trips. And I know it's something I want for her. My boyfriend, Brett, he wants a boat. So a little simpler. Um, but like, I think it's important for each of us to assess like what our whys are, because when times get tough like that, we really have to have the grit, but we have to think about that why. And that the mom one is a big one for me. She's just been so amazing and I'd love to be able to give back to her. So maybe you could
I,
share a little bit about hitting that wall and thinking about those why you're doing
so
this.
it's extremely important. And so, one of the things that you just spoke about, with your mom and being able to provide for her and your boyfriend and helping him achieve or attain some of the things that he wants to attain.
Get his boat.
Um,
Yeah.
get his boat. Touching on the point that we talk about, I think, and what often gets, I find a lot of uh, dog trainers and people in the dog pet industry, when I say pet industry, I'm not talking about like food and stuff like that. I'm talking about pet services. Um, you know, there's a lot of whys. I love dogs and, want to help dogs and don't get me wrong. Um, I love working with dogs, but we all need money to survive.
Mhm.
Right. And so I think it's an important why. And there's a lot of times in society and within this industry, it's kind of looked down upon. Like if I'm training this dog for the money as
Mhm.
opposed to wanting to help dogs. It's a job. It takes effort. It takes skill. And it has value. And, as I speak about this because I think it's important and I just think it's just not talked about enough. You should want money. You should want to be able to attain for yourself or your loved ones the things that you desire. And you should want to be able to do that through something you enjoy. So why shouldn't I be able to enjoy working with dogs and enjoy making money from it? Like it's not an evil attached to something pure, right? Because we need this. And
Right.
so with new trainers, especially, because there's different avenues, right? Whether it's a rescue or a shelter or whatever. Um, and I tell them, I'm like, we don't run on donations. We run on people spending their money. If people aren't spending their money, we're not here. And so it's extremely like it is easily one of the hardest things that I have to get trainers to come in to think about. So the dog will come in, and these are like this is true. So when I say this is true, it's just dog comes in super cute. I love that dog. I would own that dog if I didn't have my own. It's a client. They want a service. So right now, and I'll say this, what are you thinking about? Are you thinking about how cute that dog is? Are you thinking about how much money you're going to make off that person? Right? And I'm not saying, right, we should always, like, we have these dollar signs in our eyes every time. But I speak to people, trainers in particular, like that because it's usually in the back of their mind. And I'm not saying it's got to be like right here, but it's got to be there. Like you have to know the salary you're getting paid is not coming from the earth, right? It's coming from that person. It's coming from that person who's paying us. And so it's always been interesting to me. And this is one of the reasons when you talk about the why, one of my whys was literally because So when I started, I said I did martial arts. So one of the things about the martial arts organization I work for, because martial arts was very much like dog training in the 70s, 80s, even early 90s, where most martial arts instructors had other jobs and they would come teach martial arts in their whatever school or stuff after they got off of work. So classes were like 6 to 9. They were all part time. And so the organization that I worked for was one of the first organizations that said they did not want their trainers, their instructors working another job. They want them to be able to fully commit to this. And in order to do that, then there had to be a business model that allowed for them to make enough money so they didn't need another job. And so that was one of my whys. I was like, okay, so I had this experience here. This was an industry where everybody worked part time, and these people came along and said, we're not going to do it like that. You love doing this. You should be to make as much money as you want doing this. And that's what they did. So I said, okay, well, I like that idea. I think people should be able to love what they do and make the money. It shouldn't be or it shouldn't be like, oh, I got to sacrifice this to do this. And so that was part of the reason why I spent so much time on the business model, because I wanted it to succeed, not just for me, but for anybody else, hence the franchise opportunities and all that, the book, the podcast, for anyone else who wanted to come along and do it. But it does take a realistic, professional understanding that you need money to live. And chances are you want to live comfortably. And there's nothing wrong with that.
Mhm.
You could want a huge house. Nothing wrong with that either. You don't have to say, well, I'll never have that because I'm just a dog trainer, right? You don't have to say that. But it does then having a different, let's say not different, I'll even say an additional focus. We have to see multiple things when this client walks in the door. The dog, the person, how do we relate? How do we rapport? How do I speak to this person? So, we were talking about this in terms of, calls when you're, following up on leads and stuff like that. So we have all these procedures. And that was the one thing I learned by working at this karate organization. They have procedures for everything. So at the martial arts, we have procedures for everything. How do I speak to somebody? And so my one thing is always, people don't know how to get their dog started in training. So they just call and they say, well, how much are your classes? That's just like the standard thing. And so I always say, and it's in my book, from the minute the person phone calls and says, how much are your classes? I say, it is no longer a fair fight. And by a fair fight means they don't know how to get started. And I know everything I'm going to say about getting them started. And I know what I'm going to say based upon what so many other people say in this situation.
That's
And
cool.
so this is where sometimes we start to get uncomfortable because now we're leading somebody. Now, here's the thing. So I always say to trainers, I say, listen, at the end of the day, we're selling dog training lessons. We want people's lives to be better with their dogs and the relationships and have the dog have a better life and whatever it may be. We are not taking people's savings. We are not getting them to invest in something that does not exist. We're getting them let's say to invest in their dog, their relationship with their dog, because they got a dog because they wanted to have a great relationship with their dog. Even if the dog had behavior issues when they got it because they wanted to improve that dog's life. And we are going to help them do that. It costs money. We are not asking them to give us money that we're going to then buy a stock that our uncle told us about, that he heard from his cousin, who heard from his son, who goes to school with some, you know what I'm saying? Like it's important, I think, when I talk to my trainers, if they get uncomfortable, to understand that we're doing this because we're providing them a service. And this is truly a person who does not know how to get their dog started. And if we just said our classes are, let's just say our private sessions are $65 a session and stopped, then they're going to be like, oh, okay, right? They're looking for that guidance. So then they're going to ask another question, or they're going to say thank you and hang up the phone and call somebody else, which we don't want because we'd like them to have them as a client, right? So when they ask that question, then we have a conversation with them based upon the one thing I always say, getting them in, because how can we help the dog if they're not in? Everyone's going to say something different. Well, my dog's choosy with people. What does that even mean? Are they, you know, are they fearful? Do they have aggression issues? Like what does that mean? So we have to get them in. And so this is what I'll tell a trainer. I said, so we have this procedure to get the dog in the door. Even at a bare minimum, if you were like, I don't ever want any money in my life, I just want to help dogs. You're not helping a dog if you can't get it in the door. So we
I like
have to be able to get him in the door.
I liked the confidence when you said, was it, this isn't a fair fight. This is no longer a fair fight. When the
Yeah,
client asks,
yeah,
what's your programs? What's your
yeah,
package? And when you're like,
yeah, yeah.
I got this. So
Done.
maybe, yeah, that's the thing, is that confidence is what I wish all of our dog training clients, like, we run the software and we encourage them to answer the phones, and that I want
Yeah,
them to show up on that phone call with
right.
that kind of, like, can you speak on that a little bit? Cause I thought that was a really, this isn't even a fair fight. Like, I got this.
It's not. And so, and like I said, and it really, and this is why I said it's not, you have to, it becomes more than just the dog. So without, if the person doesn't come in, I can't help the dog. If the person doesn't pay me, I can't help the dog. Because even if I really, really, really want to help the dog, I have to live. I need to live a life. And we work hard, and you should get whatever it is. You shouldn't be like, oh my God, I can't afford this because I'm only charging this person this much money because I really want to help them. You'll be doing that for the rest of your life. So at some point, you have to value yourself and your time. And that's, everybody's different. That's a hard process. But the confidence that you're talking about, it, having a process, right? So we call it procedures. So our info call, as we like to call it, is a process of just simply getting people in the door. And that process, I always say, everyone who calls should come in.
Mm-hmm.
There should be no reason why they don't, because they're looking for these kind of things. And I will say, I don't have, the exact numbers on this, and I wish I did, but if we get them on the phone, I'm going to say it's well over 90%. I mean, there's times people will send in an online form, and then we call them, and they don't, and we call 3 times at least. And then it's funny because you talk about following up. So we call a minimum of 3 times. On the third call, we send them an email also. So it's really 4 points of contact. And sometimes if we get slow, we'll just go through all the people we called 3 times and call them one more time. But so it's well over 90%, and it's 90% because people, one, like I said, it's not a fair fight, but they don't know how to get their dog started. And at the end of the day, there's nothing really they can learn, with the exception of how much it costs. Or do you work with this kind of dog? They don't know unless they bring the dog in. We don't know about the dog. They don't really know how it's going to, how we're going to work with the dog or how effective it's going to be unless they come in anyway. And so we'll say that sometimes within the phone call, like, listen, you have a lot of great questions. These are fantastic questions. This is exactly why we have our evaluation, for you to come in and we can spend more time and show you around the facility and work with your dog and be better equipped to answer these questions. And so that's what I mean by we always have something to say when they have something to say, because it's not like they don't want to come in, let's say. And if somebody doesn't want to come in, and this is where I think some people, dog trainers in particular, they're uncomfortable. Like, I don't want to be pushy and all that. And so we're not pushy. If they're like, we don't want to come in, we're not like, yeah, come in. You know what I mean? It's not like that when I'm like, it's not a fair fight. We don't wear them down. We don't bully them. We don't push them.
Right.
Because it's important not to, because nobody likes that. But what we
No.
do essentially, when I say it's not a fair fight, is we know how to make it easy for people to come in. And so most of the time, it's too hard. And by that, I mean, one, you're answering a lot of questions. The more questions that you answer on the phone, the harder it is to get them in. People think it's the opposite. Because if you spend enough time with them on the phone, they're not coming in at that point. They're not. They're like, you know what? Thanks. I'm going to now call you. I'm going to call the next place. And I always like the shorter you can make that phone call, the more likely you're going to succeed. And these are always the habits. Oh my God, I really want them to come in. All right. So end the phone conversation and ask them when they want to come in. And so that's part of the process. So we'll say, these are a lot of great questions. This is exactly why we have the evaluation for you and your dog. When is a good day and time to come in? Boom. Now they'll say, well, maybe Monday. I do have another question. What do you do for puppies? For puppies, we have a puppy class. We also do private lessons. And this is a great question about your specific puppy as it relates to what's going on. So we can further address that during the evaluation. When's a good day and time for you to come in?
Perfect.
So we always come back to that. When is a good day and time for you to come in? When is a good day and time for you to come in? And I do this in my podcast too, because we do it with a lot of things in terms of when we're signing people up. We have 3 options you can choose from, 8, 16, or 24. Which one works best for you? Well, I had one more question. How does the pool work? Well, the pool is part of any package you should get. So whether you're here for obedience, agility, or whatever it is, you do not have to spend extra money or buy additional package for the pool. So which one works best for you, the 8, 16, or 24? Like we always come back to that. So, and that's what I mean by make it easy. Like it's just a choice. What time is good for you to come in? It's just a choice. Okay, I got Monday at 7:00. Boom, perfect. The longer I talk, the more we talk about, the more that conversation goes, we're just getting in the way. Always keeping in mind, they don't know how to get their dog started. You are having a conversation with someone who doesn't know what they're doing. And the longer you have that conversation, the more time you're spending, the more energy, the more effort on a dog that you can't help unless they come in.
I think too, sometimes dog trainers, we think about ourselves too much, just like, we're busy and we're business owners. And we get in the mindset of that first phone call. That is our pre qualifying call. But I think it should be a warming call. You're warming the lead so that you're warming them to come in. And when they do come in, chances are they're going to buy your bigger package because you've had such great customer service, which builds trust. And I think I can share an example of one time when I, had a few situations with clients and dogs, and I got a call. It was 2 sibling shepherd male puppies. And I'm like, oh, I was kind of triggered. And she sounded older. And I'm like, this is bad. Like, you're going to have your hands full. But I didn't pre-qualify. I warmed her. I got her in. She ended up signing up both puppies and her older dog and becoming a longtime client. So instead of just like a $7,500 package with all 3 dogs, long time boarding with 3 dogs.
Right.
Just such an amazing client, amazing relationship. She was a retired police officer and a travel agent. She helped me book some travel when I was competing in Europe, like just the most wonderful person. And I almost pushed her away because I was looking at that first call as a pre-qualifying call. And I'm like, no, it's triggering for me. You're out.
Right.
We've got to look at these things like this. We're warming the lead. We don't know. It's a quick phone call. We don't know when we read the contact form, like who cares? Just get them in so we can assess better. And, sometimes, that first person who's answering the phones too, like they're the salesperson too. So I love this conversation in that you're giving really good advice to help keep it quick and short. It is good to listen, though. I guess I got to say, it is good to listen because sometimes the clients want to tell you the story about their dog and what's going on. And if you interrupt them, they start over. So it's good to listen so that we have that information and we can kind of respond from there.
So you're 100% right. And I wasn't implying that you should cut anyone off.
Yeah, I mean, totally.
Honestly, though, there are times where we do have to cut people off, but you're right. It's good to listen. And so I always tell trainers that the longer somebody talks, the more they're going to say the things you need to know.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I said, they'll be like, oh, he's choosy. And you just say, well, what does choosy mean? And then you just stay quiet and they'll be like, well, choosy means, he's just not sure of who to go up to, and then, I mean, there was this one time he went up to this one person and he wasn't really sure about them. And he kind of growled. And then there was this other time, you know what I mean? And then they just to kind of go. And so you're right. It's important to listen and let people talk because they're going to always reveal more in those moments where they're just kind of like freewheeling. And that's a balance. That's a balance. It's a balance when you're training a dog, it's a balance on the phone in particular. It's a balance in terms of the time that you have. As
It
you said,
is.
we're always busy and, we got our next lesson, we got our, whatever our next thing is. And that's why when I say short, it is the questions by which, we're always looking for red flags. And that's why I say choosy. Choosy is
Mm-hmm.
always a red flag. They're like, he's choosy. I'm like, Burr. But I think what you said was really powerful in terms of it being a warming call. And we talk about that a lot in terms of, we call it rapport. We're building rapport. From the minute they call, we are building rapport with this client and we are setting them up. And usually, I shouldn't say usually, but often the person that answers the phone isn't the one that does the evaluation anyway. And the reason why I say that is because as you're building rapport, the more information you get, the better you set up the person who actually is doing the evaluation. But yes, and that's in terms of it being, when I originally said it's not a fair fight, that warmth, that kind of like conversational, but I'm steering you down a direction. So it doesn't seem like it is a fact finding mission. It is an objective. Our objective is not to give them information. Not that we don't, but if I say my objective is to give them information, I give them the information and then I let them choose to do whatever they do and they don't know what they're doing anyway. So it's not our objective is not to give them information. Our objective is to get them to come in. Getting them to come in means we have to give them information, but that's not the objective. The objective is to get them to come in. So the information we give them helps them better come in. Right. And so
Yes.
that's kind of what I was saying in terms of the dog, looking at the puppy and assessing the owner and stuff in terms of the financial aspects of it. Clearly we want to help the dog. Like, that's why we do this. Like, we want to help the dog. We want to improve the relationship with the owner. Like, that goes without saying. I could talk about the money aspects forever, but it goes without saying that we are in this to help the dog and the owner. And so I think that's the other part of this, why specifically dog owners struggle, because they don't want to seem like they don't care about the dog. So I'm saying these things hoping, right, there's this understanding that we all care about the dog. We all care about the dog and the relationship with the owner. And we care about the owner also. Like, that's the baseline. Now that we establish that baseline, we need to get paid to do our job and to live our lives. What we do has a value, and we do not want to devalue ourselves or our time simply because we want to help. It is easy to do, but when you were talking about earlier in terms of burnout, it's a lot easier to be burnt out when you're constantly devaluing yourself because you want to help. The better you're doing in terms of your mental health, which is also going to be influenced by your financial status, and the better you're doing financially gives you the freedom and the feeling to feel that confidence and better about helping. And so again, sometimes it's the other way around. Well, if I'm just, if I want the money, then I don't feel like I'm helping. And then I feel, no, you're going to help yourself to burnout is what's going to
Right.
happen. So let's just know in your soul, right? You want to help the dogs and you want to help the people. And then, then you should be getting paid to do it. And so you can, and I always tell people, you can read some of our reviews. And I say this in the podcast, I say this in my book. There are people who do not like us. There are people who do not like us because we have policies and procedures, because we value our time. So we have, let's say, a same day cancellation policy, which is, a lot of times, and this is what happens. You don't show up at your hotel, they charge you.
Yep.
But if you don't show up for your dog training lesson, they're like, well, it's just the dog, and why would you take my money? And you're just a dog trainer and all that stuff. I mean, I've literally had people call us criminals. And this is the same person who, if they skipped their hair appointment would get charged anyway. But
Yep.
we're criminals as dog trainers because we're going to charge them for the lesson that they've now blown off. We already gave them a freebie. Now they've blown off twice. And again, I think when you're new as a dog trainer, or you're insecure about these things, somebody says that you're greedy. Oh my God. It's like, you don't want to appear greedy. You love helping dogs. And now somebody thinks you're a charlatan. There's no way around that.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
You've
a
got to
people
have
business,
boundaries.
and people are going to say it. And like I said, I could talk all day because there's another line that we drew in the sand with our same day cancellation policy. And this was before we had it. And it was a client. She didn't come three sessions in a row, right? She didn't show up. And we called her each time. She said, I'm not going to make it. Not going to make it. So again, it's like 10 after. She didn't have the courtesy to call us before. This is someone who does not value our time. And as a professional, as someone who will undoubtedly have other clients, and I can get to that in a second, who do value your time, this person does not.
Mm-hmm.
So the last time she did it, I said, I'll never forget this phone call. I was terrified. So she said, I said, I have to take the session. Like, this is the third week in a row. You didn't even call us. It's 10 minutes in the appointment. This is an appointment someone else could have. I have to take the session. She said, if you take the session, I'm never coming again. So two things happened. I took the session and she never came again. But what we have, and this is a true story now, we've now had people call us and and you feel for them, but they call us, they value our time. They're like, listen, we're not going to make it. My wife was in a car
Right.
accident. This is a true story. True story. My wife was in a car accident. We're not going to make it to the lesson, so we're on our way. I'm on my way. And we're like, oh my God, like, just, it's okay. Just go take care of,
Yeah.
did my camera cut off?
Nope. You're good.
Okay.
It's okay here.
Um, um, and so this is one of the choices that I always talk about. You get to decide what kind of client you want to have. You can have a client that doesn't value your time, or you can have a client that does value your time. It is as simple as a choice as that. We made that choice. Now we have clients that value our time. And I can tell you this, as many people who might complain now that we have this procedure where they lose the session, we had clients before complaining about something else. So the complaints, when you're dealing with people, because this is a people business, are always going to be hard to avoid. So the question then comes down to, what type of client do you want? And what type of complaints do you want to have to deal with? Because they're going to happen. And case in point, like I said, these are how we end up burning ourselves out, because we're trying to
Mm-hmm.
make everybody happy. We're afraid to have that bad review. We're terrified someone's going to go online and badmouth us. And let me tell you, I cannot stand it when it happens. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. I can't stand it. But I won't change the policy simply because they're going to do that. Because then you're not going to have any policies. You're not going to have any policies at all. I had a lady complain about the refund policy one time, and she said, this is, again, these are true stories. She said, our refund policies, it's 7 days or whatever it is. Somebody buys a package. And she said, well, you just made that up. So, it's junk or whatever she said. And I said, I'm sorry. I said, correct me if I'm wrong, but did not Target make up their refund policy too? And you abide by that. So somebody's making these things up. And this is why I say, in terms of,
Right.
how you're afraid to feel a certain way. Somebody's making these things up. And in this case, it just happens to be you. And so sometimes we don't feel we have the right even to be like, have these boundaries and these procedures. Who am I to say, I got to be nice and this, that, and the third. And, you want to be professional. You want to create rapport, and you want your clients to value your time, though. And so we always say, hard on the rules, soft on the people. So you understand, I'm sorry. I appreciate that you've come here, and I appreciate you called. I appreciate all the time that you spent, this, that, and the third. And again, this other client would have gladly had your spot had you not have booked it and then, just not shown up. And, but anyway, again, I'll stop myself. So it's so important. These things are so important. They're just so important. And then just times I feel so bad for dog trainers out there who are struggling with these things. Because I know I struggled. That client, we went at least a year and a half. That might have been even 2015. We might have went. No, that was a year and a half before we even had a late, or same day cancellation policy. And so I always tell people, start it right away. I'll tell you the other thing that we did wrong. I didn't charge enough money right away. If I opened up again, if I did it all over, and I tell everybody this, starting over, charge more sooner. Period. Just do it, because you end up working so much harder for so much less money. And so again, what kind of client do you want to have? So you could charge somebody, again, arbitrarily, let's just say $500 for whatever. For the same thing, you could charge $250. So now when you're charging $500, you're dealing with one person. When you're charging $250, you got to deal with two people.
Well, more people,
you know
more
what
problems.
I mean? And so, right. And then it's more
I
problems
heard that on
for
your
the same amount.
podcast. Yeah.
And then it's the same amount of then it's for the same amount of money. And so this is to me the joy of the business aspect. This is the beauty of it. Now I can do this thing that I love. And not only can I do this thing that I love, I get to decide essentially how I do it, who I want to interact with, how people should treat me.
Yeah.
Right. And that's the joy of owning your own business, because you get to decide how people can treat you.
I think too, we all have to deal with sticky situations, and sometimes it's better to get them on the phone instead of you have to deal with them through a text message or an email. And they can be kind of keyboard warriors. Now, what we do is all of our calls are recorded. So if we provide phone service for dog trainers all across US, Canada. Certain states, it's one party consent. Certain states is two party consent. So like my residence is South Dakota. So if you call me, the call is recorded. It's one party consent. You may not know it's recorded, but we're cool. We're legal. But some states, probably New York, is probably two party consent. But either way, we are in a high risk industry. We deal with some of the things you're talking about. I'm like, yep, been there, done that, got the tattoo. But we need to protect ourselves, and we need to record things. If you have a facility and you've got group classes and a dog fight breaks out, having video. Animal control could get called. This is a very high risk industry. Dogs run away, dogs bite. People don't listen. So just thinking of ways to make sure that you have evidence and you can protect yourself. And like I said before, the keyboard warriors, it's probably best to pick up the phone, because they're probably going to be a lot easier to deal with. And maybe you can work something out and everybody be cool.
That's always the goal. We of course we do email. We do have a text messaging system, but if we have their phone number, like someone will email, and I'll be talking to the trainer and be like, so and so emailed, and so I emailed them back this. I said, well, why don't you call them? Well, they emailed, so why don't you call them? You know what I mean? Like, just because they reach out one way doesn't mean you can't just pick up the phone and call them. There's, and like you said about the recordings and stuff like that, I've been looking into different systems as it relates to things like that. But definitely in the facility, even if you're not in the facility, and there's a lot of ways you can explain it. But even if you're going to people's homes or whatever, I'm gonna set up my phone here and I'm going to record the session. You can say, listen, if you want a copy of it too, I can give you a copy. So that's one way if you think compliance is going to be an issue, that's one way you can get compliance, because now it's a training tool for them, because they can review the lesson. But you're right, protection, like we have waivers and things that we fill out. Mm-hmm. You're always looking to protect yourself. And that's one of the things that I don't like about online reviews, is because anybody can say anything. We had a guy make a complaint. He never even took a session. And I'm like, this is ridiculous. and whatever your responses are, then it just comes to this online, and I'm just like, it's very, very challenging in those situations. We'd rather not have it get there. And we've had, you always get the person who's going to threaten. And I can tell you, man, we've had some people threaten some crazy things, which is also the other thing to think about. And I talk about this, in my book, and the podcast. So what is worth it? There are times where we've established our line in the sand, or we have our established lines in the sand, and I'm like, we are just, that line doesn't exist right now. We're going to just walk back on our policy, because there are just times where this is a business. And so if you look at everything in terms of your time, in, let's just say, arguably by the hour, whatever. So whatever amount of hours you work in a day, and just for simplicity, if you work, we'll just say 5 hours a day at $100 an hour, within your workday, and now you're dealing with these issues after that, then your hourly rate is going down. And
Mm-hmm.
that's another thing people don't realize when we talk about value or time, especially with complaints. And this is where you really have to say, is it worth it to just give them their money back? Is it worth it just to give them another session for free? Is it worth it to just literally be like, we're sorry, there's nothing else we can do for you, and end it? So we always talk about, the demand barking dog, right? So now we have a demand barking client. Are we going to shush it? Because we know shushing it is engaging it. Or are we going to ignore it? And so this is what I would say is, as you go through your business, in the beginning, you're like, if somebody complains, I'm just giving them what they want until I feel more confident. That's fine. You have to work up. So your experience. So I can say there's times where I'm like, the trainers will say, well, why did we give them their money back and these other people we didn't? Because that is going to cost us far more than the refund. Simple as that. That is a straight up business decision. In this situation, it will cost us. And I remember another time where I learned this lesson the hard way. It was during COVID, and everybody wanted their money back during COVID, and we were closed. I'm like, you want your money back? I don't even know if I'm going to have money next week. Like, this is, everyone's funds are dwindling. I'm like, and this lady was like, she was a problem from the start. And this was going on years at this point. But anyway, she wanted her money back, and to say she was past, this is years, so she's well past the refund window, and we're closed down. And when we opened back up, and we offered people online lessons and all these other things, and this, that, and the third. To make a long story short, this went on so long that I can tell you, the one thing I wish I did the minute she asked me was give her her money back.
Yeah.
Was that one person essentially cost me so much money in time and in just management of the difficulty that they were putting on not just me, but the other trainers. And they were always complaining sometimes, and this, that, and nothing was ever good enough. And I was like, oh my God. So that is something to keep in mind. And, there's always this kind of scenario where it's like, we're talking here, and I know I'm saying a lot, and, whoever's listening is like, oh my God, like, at one point I was sticking to my boundaries. Now I'm not sticking to I don't know what to do. One, this is why it always helps to have a mentor or somebody you can go to and talk to, who might have had the business longer than you. That always helps. But it's just a framework. So we have these procedures, and there's times we get someone to call and our procedure's not going right. The person might call and start crying. And I'm like, okay, this conversation is clearly going to be longer than I'd like it to be. But we're talking about the warming and the rapport and all that stuff. So it doesn't go the way you plan. That's, an experience thing. You have to decide for yourself a lot of times what is worth it. So I had somebody blow us all 3 times in a row. And to me, that seemed like the perfect time to lay down the law and say, we're not doing this anymore. And we did it, and it worked out. That could have went a different way. What I can say is I do know what leads to burnout. And it's always going to be the scenario where you just feel like you have to give into what everybody says, or something bad is going to happen. You're too defensive. You're too scared.
Mhm.
You're not going to love what you do anymore. You're going to
Mhm.
every time it's just not going to be what you envisioned it to be. And so that unfortunately is a scenario that we create because either we didn't have the preparation in terms of the business aspect of this that we needed, um, or we're just, we're not, we're too afraid to tell people, you know, no.
To stand up
I
for
mean, essentially,
ourselves.
yeah,
Yeah, to
just the
stand up for
answer is
ourselves.
no, and then
Yeah.
like that lady said, well, I'm not coming back. And you know what, I would, if I
Bye.
had to have a business, yeah, if I had to have a business full of hers, I would be out of business. There's no way I would have made it.
Yeah.
There's no way. We have our late cancellation policy where the clients lose the session now, and we'll still sometimes have 3 or 4 cancellations in a day. If
Mhm.
we didn't have that, I mean, we would just be standing around, and you can't. How do you fill the time then?
Yeah, it's a
It's
very, very
valuing the
good point.
time. That's the biggest thing I can say is you just have to teach people to value your time. You have to,
Yeah, I
or
think
you just because. Go ahead.
I I I think that some of the sticky situations I've been in where a client's been difficult, you have to figure it out. Um, you just gut up and work it out, and at the end of it, you've learned something. So, like you mentioned about the one where, like, looking back, I should have just given her her money back. So now you can kind of spot those, but we can't really be trained on this stuff. This is just like a wild ride, and it's sad and it's depressing and it's burnout and it sucks. But when you just keep going through it and you get to the other side of it, you've learned something, and maybe it'll
Yeah.
help someone else the next time, or it'll help you the next
Right.
time. I'm thinking of one situation where it was like COVID, and it was that COVID time when we were super busy. Everybody was gotten dogs, the shelters were empty. So we had to post our prices, just a starting price on our website, and we only did board and trains. And so this one person reached out, and I'm like, this is our starting price, just because we were just so busy. The tire kickers. And I got a mean email back. I was like, okay, and I can get online training for this much, and I mean, it's a board and train start, so it's like, I don't know, well over $1,000, but that's
Right.
all we did. And I was like, that is a nasty. Is this real? Like, anyway, so with our system, we put them on do not disturb. So we would never accidentally send them a newsletter or anything, or like, we're having a special.
Right. Right. Right.
um,
Right. Right.
so one day though, they reached out. They actually booked a consultation, and the confirmation didn't fire off because it won't, because it's on do not disturb.
Right.
And I'm like, what do we do? Like, they've requested it, and like nothing fired off, at least. So we called them and we were like, do you remember us? Because you reached out before and we talked, and then you sent us this email and it was really ugly. And they apologized and booked. They went through the ringer. They did the online training. It didn't work. The dog was driving them crazy. Now they saw the value. And so that was just really stressful. Like, oh yeah, I got to make this phone call. And it ended up being like the best client. Like, we helped them
Right.
so much because they just knew nothing. I mean, they were like, I can fix this
Right.
with online training. So, they knew nothing. So we helped them so much. They saw the value. They felt really bad about the crazy email. So sometimes you just persevere and you get to
One
the other
hundred
side,
percent.
and it's maybe going to be a positive, and they appreciate you more. So yeah.
Yeah. Those are the kind of stressful moments. Like they're people. They are going to get upset, and we've had similar scenarios, and we have our policies, and there are times that people don't like them, and we've gotten similar emails, and those clients have returned, and we just keep it moving, because it's the nature of the business. You hated us 2 years ago, now we're the greatest thing.
Yep.
It's for us, it's always about, clearly if you're in here and you're acting like that, then that's a different story. But you had your moment for whatever was going on. They didn't see the value in what you did. They didn't understand why, or they were just having a bad day. And I think we don't I don't think we put enough into that. Like some people, it's got nothing to do with you. It's literally got nothing to do with you. And
Yeah.
we take it on so much. Um, but it doesn't have anything to do with you. So you got to let it go. And I always say to trainers and stuff, it's just like the dog, the reactive dog. That dog was going crazy right now. If you were looking and you were treating that dog like it was just acting, you wouldn't be able to help it. So it's the same thing with the person. If you're still looking at them like they just sent you that email 6 seconds ago, we can't help them, right? And if we can't help them, we can't help the dog.
Mm.
So even when we have these confrontations, because it does happen, we're always looking to how do we resolve this because we want to help the dog. This person doesn't know they're having a bad day or whatever it is. And sometimes that's the unfortunate nature of it, right? It's a
Yep.
people business. And so we can't help the dog. That's why the dog is having the life it is because this person is the way they are. And that's, that's when it's really unfortunate. You're like, this poor dog is now stuck with this
Mm.
person and there's nothing we can do about it. And then you just, like you said, you just learn. And then hopefully the next time you're able to diffuse the situation or that
Yes.
experience, and I think that's the biggest thing, we've been talking about. You're not necessarily going to know what to do, but at least you'll be more aware of it happening. It won't be
Yep.
a surprise. That's always the biggest thing. Like, I had no idea this was going to happen. I didn't know it was going to be this hard. So I'm telling you it's hard, so it's like, you have a better foundation going in. I mean, that's always the biggest thing. You have this better foundation going in. And then from that point, it'll be easier for you to succeed. And like you were saying, helping the next person along, we kind of put for this journey first, and then the next person has a little easier. I like that. I like helping people, especially when it comes down to something that they want to do. That's just always been part of who I've been. Um, and so hence, once I got to a point, like I said, the book, um, Unleash Your Success, it's called how to become how to be a financial success as a dog trainer. And then Financial Fido is the podcast.
Hmm.
Um, but it's just being in that position where you'd be like, I've seen a lot over these years.
And that's
And
why we have policies, because of what you've seen. Because, we have to say it sometimes that other people ruined it for you. And that's why we have to collect the money before you start your training. We can't collect it at the end
oh,
because other people have ruined it.
ruined it, ruined it. We
So
don't do, yeah,
that's the
same thing.
policy.
That's one of the best, we all of it up front. And people say, do can I make payments? You can buy a smaller package. You know what I mean? Like this, you don't have to do this many sessions at one time. You can do this many sessions at one time. But no, you can't make payments. One of the sillier, it's not really silly, honestly, but one of the smaller, um, policies that we have that, sometimes rubs people really the wrong way. So we're an indoor facility, right? And we have rubber flooring and all this kind of stuff. So we have what's been called, our pee fee.
Oh,
So if a
right.
dog pees, it's $3. Um, Not because we need $3 more. It's just a deterrent. And I can tell you there was another time. Um, I remember the client's name. Well, it's like it's so burned in there. Her dog starts peeing on the floor and she's just standing there and the dog's peeing
Mm.
and she's standing there and she's just like she's outside. Like this is not outside. It's just, and it's peeing and it's peeing and this is like the longest. Now, clearly I understand why this dog peed on the floor because it had to go, right? But she's not even like, I'm sorry. She's not even embarrassed by this. Like she's just standing. I would have been mortified. Like, when is the last time you took your dog out to go to the bathroom? First of all, let's address that, let alone you're just letting it pee like this is supposed to happen. So that was the last time. Then we put in a $3 pee fee. And
I love it.
people have to initial it because then they said they didn't see it. So you got to initial it on top of signing. And I've had people say, I'm not signing that. That's fine. And they're, and we're just standing there. We used to have people fill it out. Now we email it to them first. So then they'll call or email, um, you know, not signing it. They're like, my dog Marks. Okay, put a belly band on it, right? Because at the end of the day, no one wants to come in here and it's smelling like urine everywhere. Because it's
Mm.
not even just about cleaning at some point. It's just seeping in the walls. And so, sorry. So, but and I talk about this in my book too. When you have your um, form, whatever your policies are, so we send that to people first. Read this, initial and sign. If they don't want to do it, you just saved yourself a difficult client that you probably didn't want in the first place. That is our first line of defense. This is a people business, and we know how people get. So you read through this. If you can't say, I understand, I do not want to have this facility that you guys work so hard in cleaning smell disgusting, because if it does, I'm not going to want to be in it either. Or just general respect for your, the environment. And here's the other thing we do. So this is about, in terms of how you want people to treat you. Not only we charge them $3, they have to clean it up.
Ooh, good. Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? And I can't tell you the number of times, especially new trainers, they just can't help themselves.
Yeah.
They just want to clean it up. I'm like, don't do that again. It's their dog. They're not going to, are you going to run outside when it goes to the bathroom and then clean it up for them? No, like it's their dog. They need to clean up after their dog. We're the trainer here. This is the relationship. And it doesn't mean, let's be clear, doesn't mean we don't ever do it. Doesn't mean there aren't some times where it's like super messy and we need like towels and things or whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like we're not just like looking at them like with this smirk on as they clean up this mess in front of us. You know what I mean? Like we're not power hungry, but it teaches people to respect your environment and your time.
Yeah.
We spend all day there with client after client after client. The least you could do is respect the environment that I'm in and my time. Clean up after your dog, please. I should not have to tell you to do that. And I should not have to charge you $3 just to get you to take your dog outside. You know what? Okay. Anyway, so that's one of my biggest pieces of advice. Whatever your policies are, write them down, have people read them and sign them before you do anything.
Hang them on the wall
and,
if you got a facility.
And hang them on the wall. Ours are up on the wall, all that kind of stuff. Even though they're on the wall, they're like, oh, I didn't look at the wall. And so we're like, this is the kind of like, we've been down this road before. So you got to read it. And so we would have people just sign it. And then they just wouldn't read it. They would just sign it. And now they have to initial next to it. They might not still be reading it, but we're doing as much as we can to force feed them this information. And there's times we'll even tell them because it comes up. So your first session is booked Friday at 2:30. Just so you know, we have a late same day cancellation policy, blah, 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 blah. Even though, it was in the email that they got, the confirmation email, it's on the receipt. They had to sign the paperwork, and we still do a fourth one where we tell them. And you know what they say? Oh, I didn't know. That's when you're like, oh, let me hug your dog.
Poor dog.
Let me just hug your dog.
Yeah, I know a lot of trainers that have what they term like a commitment form. They're committed to their dog. They're committed to the training. That might be a good time to actually have something printed out. I think it should be really easy to read with like initial, like don't have it be like legalese or anything, just really big writing so they can kind of skim it and initial. Take the equipment off the dog. Don't leave him wearing his equipment all the time when you're home. I'm going to practice, things like that. And policies and procedures that fit for your facility.
Your business. Yeah. And listen, I mean, we have some legalese on we've had people, I had one person just recently, they were like, this place is too corporate for us. Small business, only one right now, but we were too corporate just from the form that we had them fill out. And there's legal stuff in there is what we're talking about. You have to protect yourself. These are live animals. And we're in a facility. There's been fights and stuff like that. And so we have to make sure people know their responsibility in these situations. And we don't shy away from it. If you can't understand the nature of the liability that we take on having your dog here to help you improve your relationship and or just have fun with your dog, then unfortunately we're not the place for you. And whether you have a facility or not, even if you're working with the dog and you're going to their house or whatever it is, you still have to have these protections in place because they will blame you. And I always say to trainers, I said, listen, you're the professional here. This is no different than someone going to their doctor and their doctor saying there's nothing wrong and then they have a heart attack. Like if you say that dog is fine and it's not, that is now on us. So you need to find the words that accurately reflect what's going on with that dog, even if it's usually fine, mostly fine, better than it used to be, so much better. There's so many other words you can use except for an absolute that now says this person now just brings it somewhere because they're a person and they bring it somewhere that they shouldn't because you said the dog was okay. You didn't mean okay all the time, but that's what you said.
Yeah.
Like the doctor said, the guy's okay, and then he just drops dead. Then that's you're liable. We do it especially if there's a child in the house. I had somebody come in one time. Their dog resource guarded everything, not just food, everything. They're having twins. They of course wait till 2 weeks before the twins are coming. Now
Perfect
2 weeks
timing.
before.
Yeah.
And I literally said, "What's your goal?" And she said, "My goal is to make my house as safe as possible for my twins." I said, "Then you can't have this dog anymore."
Yeah.
And she looked at me like I was a horrible person. And I said, "Listen," I said, "that's what I have to say when you say safest. We can make it more safe. Like there are so many things that we can do, but the absolute safest scenario is this dog not be anywhere near twin babies." Like, let's just be clear. And then we work back because if I'm like, sure, no problem, it'll be fine. And God forbid,
It won't be. Yeah.
you just, so because they're people. That's why, we could say maybe the dog is but it's the person. Come take the photo with the family, chomp. Like, oh my God, just stay off of social media with the pictures with you and your dog. So that's the other thing I will say. You put your information out, you put your whatever you don't want people to do, you throw it in their face first, professionally and courteously, of course. Um, and then you have to be mindful of your liability and don't say or take unnecessary risks that you don't have to. I always say that'll ruin your business more than telling people, you know, you're gonna take their money because they didn't show up for their lesson. Like you can withstand things like that. But if you're telling people, if you're exposing yourself to liability risk, that'll shut you down before any other policy that you have for sure. And we've had to testify. I don't know if you've ever had to testify. We've had to testify in a number of court cases with bites. And none of them were, we had one that just they came after the dog bit and you're like, ugh. That was a terrible one, but we had to testify after which was weird because we didn't have any interaction with the dog prior to it biting, and after it bit, the county came and took the dog and put it in a shelter for like 60 days before he could get it out. I'm like, this is undoubtedly a different dog than what he had before. So
Yeah.
if you're asking me questions about what it was like, what might have provoked, I have no idea. We saw a different dog than what happened before. Everything we say about this dog right now very well might not apply to anything about it, good or bad. So that's why I always say, like you were talking about earlier in terms of, just protecting yourself. Like it's scary. And when people get upset, people get hurt, especially when there's a child involved, like this one had to do with a child, they're coming after everybody.
Yeah.
They don't care if it was your fault. They're just hurt. They're angry. You think a bad review is bad. You can survive a bad review, but somebody
That's a
coming
good
after you
point.
legally,
That is a very, very good point. Or just knowing inside that you didn't tell them to get rid of the dog, even though it's already bit the kid in the face, and they're like, no, we'll be okay. We'll just do training, and it's like, I don't want any
oh,
part of this. And
no part.
yeah, and you saying, I don't want any part of this. I don't think this dog should be in this home. That may be enough to help them to make the decision versus babying them and trying to help them and trying to lead them gently to you saying, I don't want any part of this. I've seen this before. And yeah, I don't want the liability. I don't think here. I don't understand. I'm not a parent. I'm not good with kids, but I never really understood when a dog bites a kid in the face, how mom is like, we'll just figure it out. It's a high caliber breed. It's just, it's your kid's
I
face or it's your kid's life. But anyway, we're
I
going
had
down in
one.
the weeds a little bit here, but go ahead.
To your point, I mean, we don't have to talk, but I had one that was so bad. I mean, it was a resource guarding dog, and the dog had a toy, and a little girl went to take it, and the dog was like absolutely, I was sleeping. And this is why I was like, I got to tell the story because the dog bit. And of course, the girl, she was 9 at the time. She was like, and she pulled her arm back. And so she didn't want to get rid of this dog. And so I'm like, and here's what I always, and this is another reason why I tell trainers this, depending upon how bad, especially if it happens again, now we're getting child protective services involved.
Yes.
And I tell
Hmm.
every parent, if they come to me, I'm going to be like, I told them to get rid of that dog. Now you're at risk of losing your child. And that's just that's bananas to me. It's crazy. It's crazy. But the point of it being the trainer part, you have to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And so you don't want to be caught in the middle of this dispute. And it's really bad when it's somebody else's child is different from the dog owner. And it's really good. Well, what did the trainer say? And every one of my trainers knows to say, we said, get rid of the dog, period. And they chose to disregard our professional opinion.
Hmm.
Because I mean, that's what you have to do. It unfortunately at that point. Again, these are the challenges. It's a people business, and I'd rather have somebody write a bad review. Right? I would have somebody write a bad review any day than get stuck in the middle of something like that.
Yeah.
That's that.
I've had people, like people that don't know dogs, say to me when I'll say something like that, and they're like, "You don't love dogs as much as I thought.
I
I thought you loved
know.
dogs more than you love kids." And it's like, well, kids
Yes.
actually live like 100 years. That's a long time. And
Right.
so, we have to consider that they're kind of important. So we
Right.
don't want them dead or disfigured. I don't know. It just seemed logical to me, but I
And
guess they think we can
it
help all the dogs, and we may be able
it's
to
so
help the dog in a different family, but he's in the wrong
right.
family.
And so that becomes the other part of it. And this is the thing as a professional. And this is why I said, like, these are sometimes I feel like the uncomfortable conversations, especially new trainers, because people will call them
Yeah.
out. They don't love dogs. My dog, and they told me to get rid of dog and all this stuff. They don't really love dogs.
Yeah.
No. So it might not, when I say, again, we're truncating here, but when I say get rid of dog, I don't mean like open the door and just shove it outside, right? Like there's so many options here.
Yeah.
Maybe a house with no children. You know what I mean? Maybe a different environment with someone who's got more experience. Like there's so many options here. But what
Hmm.
I do know is you're creating a very dangerous situation for whoever's involved with this dog. Um, and my professional opinion is this is not the right environment for that. And I have to say that in order to protect myself.
Yes.
Um, to make a long story short, the one lady with the babies, she said she wasn't doing that. And I said, okay, that's my professional opinion. You're choosing to disregard that. Okay, so so these are options, whether it's boundaries, whether it's dogs outside, whether it's 6 months, and we were able to create a structure for her and her family that actually worked. But part of that, in terms of the conversation we're saying, especially this being about people, is having an owner. And I have to give her credit. Again, she was 2 weeks away from giving birth to twins, and they still were able to do it. Usually the exception, but we're talking about an owner who is going to take on this responsibility and understand the meaning of it as best they can and listen to what you say. And that's always the biggest part. And so we say, and I told her the same thing. Child Protective Services coming here. I'm telling you, I told you to get rid of dog. Like, I'm like, you got to sign this way. Like, we're going down this legal path first. And we're going to, like, I want videos or picture. How'd you setting, and we kind of went through it. And I will say this, the main reason, well, one of the reasons why they didn't want to get rid of the dog, because it was old. And she's like, this is an old dog. And,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
And it wasn't going anywhere, but the scrap heap, if you
Still.
will. And so they were able to make it work. My point in saying this, and this is for any trainer out there, it's not about what we may do as a trainer, right? I may say we're not the place for this. You might be the trainer for those people.
Yep.
It's just about protecting yourself. That's what it's
Yeah.
about. It's about making sure you're taking the necessary precautions in the scenarios. It's not as simple as I really just want to help these people. It ain't that simple as a professional. And that's what we're talking about here. This is for professionals. And
Perfect.
these are the things that you
Perfect.
start to have to keep in mind.
Perfect what you just said there. Perfect. Yep. That is absolutely excellent, excellent advice. I think we're at an hour and a
Yeah,
half.
we would.
This is my longest podcast ever, but I'm like, this is really cool. Like we're really
I mean,
getting and I'm feeling like the stress when you're talking about like some of these painful things we go through as entrepreneurs. I'm like, yeah, this is burnout and policies are really a good way to
yeah.
solve that problem. So I think this is such a great conversation. Is there anything else you wanted to share?
No, well, God forbid I start sharing more, but what I can say is, I mean, if you want to do, we can do a series, we can do a couple. If you really like this, you get a good response, and we want to talk more about the business side of things and just stuff like this.
Yeah.
We can do a couple of these. As well, they can listen to my podcast. Like I said, it's Financial Fido. You can find it on all the podcast places. The website is financialfido.com. Um, but it's just important because it is difficult. It is triggering for some people, and you get these knee jerk reactions, and you're always afraid, from the money to the person who has to say the hard thing to the client. This is not the right house for your dog, or your dog is fat, right? Like
Oh,
these are
yes.
hard things to say. And so as professionals, and I think this is really what holds a lot of dog trainers back, making that jump. That's why I like to say, with the doctor, everything's okay, and then the person dies. Doctors have to give the most horrible news, the
Mm.
most horrible news, and they don't want to do it. But that's why the person is there. That's their job, right? And guess what?
Yes.
Doctors
Good
also
point.
make a lot of money too. Um, but so we take on that role, and I think that's really what holds a lot of trainers back. They don't really want to take that role on to now just, I am an authority figure. My
Mhm.
words have weight. My time has value. I need to protect myself also because of this. But it's not as simple as just, I want to just work with dogs, or I just want to help dogs. There's a lot of ways to do that. But if you're going to become a dog training professional, right, then it changes.
Mhm.
And you might hear this, my podcast, or any other podcast that you do, um, and they might say, maybe this isn't for me now. It's not just as simple as, I want to train dogs. And that's kind of how I would leave it. And I talk about it to trainers in my podcast, like, you shouldn't have to think about, I don't want to, yeah, you shouldn't have to think about how you need to talk to someone on the phone to help them train their dog. Like, it should be like someone needs help training their dog, and they're able just to do it. But it's people. Like, people need to be dealt with a certain way. And I don't mean that in a dirty way. I just mean, like, people are distracted. People have other priorities. You got somebody calling you who has a job, who has kids, who has 50 other, things that they wanted to do. And now they have this dog because the 8-year-old wanted a dog. And now the dog's running amok, and they're like, oh my God, like, they just want, this is, it was an emotional response to get the dog. Now they're emotionally overwhelmed, and they just want it to stop. And this is why you'll have people do all sorts of crazy things to get it to stop. And so when you kind of say, you look at it from the act of a professional, it goes beyond the dog. Okay, so this person is just somebody, arguably, who really didn't want the dog. And you can't
Yeah.
say, well, why'd you get the dog in the first place? You can't say that. Your job is now to help alleviate the stress, the pressure, the anxiety, the overwhelm that they feel,
Yes.
because that will enhance the life of the dog.
And I like that you're now speaking on the positive because that is all these things we've talked about, they're very triggering. They're depressing. It sucks. But, you know,
Doesn't sometimes.
clients that have a dog that's out of control, that's driving them crazy, that's in chaos, and they're not listening, and the dog's not listening, and it's like, oh my gosh, this is so triggering for me. But that's why you have a job, and just step back because you can help them. You are a
Right.
professional, and you can help them, and
That
that's
is
why
so
they've reached out to
powerful.
you.
Right. And that's
They
why I always
need
say,
you.
you can't, don't be like, why'd you get a dog? This is someone who reached out to you who did not have to.
Yeah.
They are seeking help from you. and they don't know how to do it. They don't know how to do it. And so I always tell trainers from the minute, that's why I say it's not a fair fight, but from the minute they call us, we are here to help. And part of the process of
Yes.
helping is steering them in the door. Because if they don't come in, we can't help them. So we have to get them in. And we have to, as you said, warming. We have to navigate this situation where most people's like, how much it costs? Okay. Then they call the next place. How much it costs? Okay. You know, like we have to ease them in the door. We have to make it easy. And as you said, when they had this out of control dog and now you've helped them, and I can't tell you the number of times where owners are like, I walk my dog down the street now, and it's just like, I'm like, this is why I got a dog. And you're like,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
I'll take the bad reviews and, the legal stuff and all that. Now this is what I wanted. And the dog is happy. The owner is happy. And we just have to recognize as professionals how to get to that place. And
Yeah.
it's just, that's where it gets, challenging sometimes. But once you are able to navigate the professional aspects of it and all the things that you may have to do that you didn't necessarily think of or want to do, that reward is that dog, is that owner, and their gratitude, or how you're seeing the dog so happy now, and the owner, even if they don't say thanks, they're just like, you can see how happy they are.
Yeah.
You can
And
see the dog can't ever thank you, but you can see how much the dog is like, oh my God, you now have this owner who, our relationship is so much better.
yes, yes. I think that's a good wrap up, that there is some
Okay.
positive that we had to look at today after kind of diving into, some of the real stuff. How can people reach you? How can they find you? I see in the background
Yeah,
www.martial
so Martial ARFS. Yeah,
martialarfs.com.
Martial ARFS is my facility where we do all the training. Um, info at Martial ARFS. You can email for information and things about what we do there. As it relates to the business aspect, that's Financial Fido, so financialfido.com. If you go to there and to be info at financialfido.com. Also, if you want to kind of reach me, or you can listen to my podcast, like I said, Financial Fido, it's on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, all that kind of stuff. And my book, which I think I have, do I have, did I
I
move it?
listened to the podcast on Audible, so that
Oh,
was
on
easy to
Audible.
find. I searched for Jeris and found it right away. Financial
Of
Fido.
course, I don't have a book. But yes, it's Unleashing Your Success: How to Achieve Financial Success as a Dog Trainer. Um, and then that's the thing. At the end of the day, we have the opportunity to make people's lives better, to make dogs' lives better, to really feel the pride and the joy of doing something we love for a living. We just need to be able to make a living.
Yes.
And you can't have one without the other, or you're running yourself ragged really wanting to do something that you feel that you can't support your life if you do. And I will tell you that's just simply not the case. You can do it. There's a lot of ways that you can do it regardless of what kind of training you do. And there's people out here to help. This podcast is great for things like that. My podcast you can listen to. There's a lot of resources out there for you to do it. So don't give up. Just know that it is possible. um, you know, I heard a quote one time. It says to achieve a place in your life that you've never been will require you to do things you've never done. So if you really want to make this happen, there's going to be things that you've never done that you're going to have to do. But in the end, right, as you talked about the why, what's your why, and you will be able to achieve that if you stick to it, if you show up, and if you really really make the changes that you might have to make for your business to be successful.
Yeah. And think about that why. Like, write down what that why is for you, and it's different for everybody. For you, Jeris, you got the kiddos, you got a family. I would assume you're trying to create something for
Yeah,
them.
it's that, being able to provide. And again, that's the thing, like I can, support my family with this, but the other part of my why is, like I said, I wanted to create something. I knew there weren't a lot of dog trainers out there who could do this, and I just had a unique experience that I knew
Yeah.
that I could put something together. And a good part of my why was being able to put myself in a position to help other people who wanted to be able to do something they love like this, um, and still financially be successful, whether it's for themselves, whether it's for their loved ones, or whether it's honestly whether somebody told them that they couldn't do that. That's a big motivator
Mhm.
sometimes, and there's nothing wrong with that. Don't let somebody tell you can't do it. I can't stand that. You can do it.
Yeah,
You can do it.
yeah, that'll kick you in the butt and get you moving. I'll show them. So yeah,
Yeah, it's
that's a
great. It's
good
great.
why. That's a
That's a
good
good
why.
why.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much,
You're
Jeris.
welcome.
Yeah,
You're
let's
welcome.
let's do this again. Thank you
Yes, for
everybody
sure.
for listening. The Martial ARFS, www.martialarfs.com. We can see it in the background there. And again, I'm Leanne Shinton, Pep is Experts. Again, we're going through name change, so we're becoming Automation Dogs, and got that rebrand going on just because we're
Congratulations.
thanks. It's a lot of work, but
Yeah.
we've got a vacant space SEO wise because Pet Biz was just like
Right.
everybody,
Yeah.
Pet
Yeah.
Biz
Yeah.
insurance and this. And I'm like, okay, let's not fight it. Let's just go for a name that has a vacant space SEO wise and hopefully a little more memorable and unique. I like it.
Yeah, listen, we can end on that too with your name rebranding, and that's something to think about. We're talking about a business, and you could be dog this and dog that, and that's why we're the martial arts, because you talk about vacant space. There was a
Mm,
vacant space for that, so just look, be creative with what you're trying to do with your dog training. There's always Sarah's dog training, or this. There's always those things, but the more you can stand out, and even if it's with your name. Is a great thing. And especially like you were saying with the SEO for what you're doing that is a huge lesson for dog trainers in and of themselves
yeah.
for sure. So
Yeah.
congratulations.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, thank you everybody for listening. Thank you for your time, Jairus, and everybody have a
You're
great
welcome.
day.
All right. Bye.